On my main channel today, I released a shootout between me and my cousin, in which me, as an experienced wildlife photographer, was forced to use a micro four thirds setup, while my cousin, a beginner, was forced to use a full frame setup. This comparison in the video is an in-detail dive into the photographs we both captured and trying to analyze what matters more, gear or skill level. We started out our shootout by trying to photograph a friendly great blue heron that was down on a rocky shoreline below us. Surprisingly, on our first attempts, we captured almost identical images with the use of foreground rocks and vegetation, and I was super proud of my cousin for recognizing these features as a way to add an artistic element to the image. As a beginner myself, I don't know if I would have been so quick to recognize that back then. As we searched for some new angles on the heron, however, we both struggled as after this first minute, the heron hunted in a direction turned towards the ocean, which meant that we lost that subject engagement. For me, rather than just trying to simply get a portrait knowing this engagement was lost, I tried displaying its hunting action a little bit more, by showing it in the top right corner, hunting into the rocks, or this image here showing an almost over-the-shoulder view of what it's like looking down on its prey. I don't think my images did a fantastic job of this, but I was trying to make something of the moment best I could. I think Aaron decided to go for more of a portrait image simply of the great blue heron in his attempts, but like I said, due to the bird turning more than 90 degrees away from us, it made it difficult to feel connected to the bird as a viewer. Ultimately, in all of these images, I found it really difficult to tell the differences between our two shots due to gear, other than the fact that Aaron's full frame gear definitely had better depth of field. In my opinion, a much more exciting moment came next with the black-crowned night heron, and showed off a little bit more of the importance of experience in wildlife photography. One flew past us and landed with a fish in its mouth. And for Aaron, understandably so, he was excited about this and thought it was super cool and photographed it right from where he was standing. Due to the full frame 50 megapixel sensor, he had no problem cropping in with the image, and the result was as follows. But for me personally, I didn't like the angles from up top on this bird and recognized a need to get down and closer and eye level with this bird. So I made my way down in order to try to get two different types of shots, a low-key image and a more aesthetic scenic image. On the low-key style image, I used a moment where a night heron popped its head right up from the dark rocks around it to achieve this. And for the scenic image, I worked my way to an angle that shows the ocean waves gently rippling behind him and a rocky outcrop in the background as well. Waiting for the wind to blow his feathers streaming behind his head was the cherry on top, and overall, I liked my results. Aaron did work on getting some unique and creative images of his own by using a sign in the foreground, but I'd argue that once again the subject being turned away from the camera hurts subject engagement, and the sign is a little bit too prominent for my taste and distracting from the bird from allowing it to be the focal point of being a quote-unquote wildlife image. I was impressed, however, with Aaron's ability to recognize a more creative take as we walked to our next location. We crossed a parking lot with some gulls lined up along the bumpers. This is where a lot of times for me, as someone who has done this so much, I simply forget to even care about moments like this, where Aaron saw something that could be cool, tried it, and achieved an image here that shows a lot of intention with the gulls lined up in the photograph. Aaron was also personally very proud and thought it was hilarious the pose of this yoga gull, as he called it here, that we walked by, and so I figured I should show this image here too. Now this is really important and worth noting as well. In these images, I'm pretty much using the best available micro four thirds camera, and I'm using the second best lens available for MFT that exists, arguably. While Aaron, he's using a good full frame camera, but definitely not the best anymore, as it's 3 years old and wasn't even the best back then, and he's using far from a top of the line lens. In fact, the total costs of our setups are roughly equal, so in terms of pricing, we had almost no difference. My favorite encounter of the day was with the willet that came next. It was a somber encounter as this guy was badly wounded and hurt, and I'd encourage you to check out the shootout video after this video on the main channel if you want to see more on that. But in short, we both got some really cool images. I think my prior experience with knowing how to compose shorebirds paid off a little bit compositionally, but Aaron also did do a good job with certain compositions of his. This was one in particular of his that I didn't show in the shootout video, but I really liked, as he did a good job of isolating the willet against the shallow water and kind of placing it in the middle of this foggy scene. My personal favorite might have been this one with a nice lead up in the wet sand to the bird. the motion of a few water droplets flicking off its beak as it eats, and the ocean waves crashing slowly behind it. Lastly, I think that this scenario with the great egret is a good example of where skill matters. We both tried to compose a solid close-up in this image, and a slightly wider scenic image of the scenario. In the close-up image, Aaron was a little too high up and shooting down onto the bird ever so slightly, which smashed the bird into the ocean waves behind it a lot more. As compared to an image like this, which due to just being photographed a few feet lower gives a much more engaging perspective and helps to isolate the bird against the foam of the white waves. Also, because of this angle, you get the feet caught up behind the foreground of a small wave that you can miss when shooting a little higher and down on it. For the wider angle, Aaron did a better job of getting low here, but lost that subject engagement once again, which disconnects the viewer from the feeling of being engaged with the bird, versus seeing it at a side angle like this one. I also choose to use the foreground sweeping up to the bird as a really good use of perspective of the scene all around the bird, rather than only behind it like the other image. Often, for a scenic shot, the use of not only background, but foreground also can play a key role in teleporting the viewer into the scene and feeling like they're truly there with the animal. So back to the question of, does MFT or full frame really matter? My answer is yes, but maybe not as much as some of us believe. There is a reason why you get what you pay for generally, but as you can see in this video, it matters more on how you use your tool than what tool you have. I used to work maintenance back in my college days and had an incredibly knowledgeable and skilled boss. I'd be trying to pound a nail in with a hammer and it would take me 4 or 5 hits, when my boss could literally just pick up any old rock off the ground and simply smash it straight in with one single hit. I'd argue that we, as wildlife photographers, often neglect investing time and even possibly money into the skill of learning our craft, and rather we throw all of our eggs into the basket of gear. In reality, gear is just a small portion of our ending quality of image, and typically, I believe that this makes up somewhere around 25% of our image. So it's important to focus on skill as well. If you want to see the shootout video between my cousin and I, so you can see in more details on how we went about getting our shots, click on this video here in the end screen, and I'll see you guys next time.